Alright, so today we're going to learn how to multiply any number by 25. So by doing that, there are 3 steps that you need to follow. So to multiply by 25. Okay, so to multiply any number by 25, the 3 steps are: step 1, divide the number. And when I say number, I mean the number that is obviously not 25. So divide the number by 4. Okay? Step 2, we're going to use the test of reasonableness That's a really long word for me to spell there. So test of reasonableness, and to see if our answer that we get from that division problem, is it large enough or is it small enough? If not, then it's going to tell us what we're going to do for step 3. And what step 3 is you're going to affix. Remember, affix means to just add on to. Affix zeros and or add a decimal point. I'm going to abbreviate point, SPT. Add a decimal point to the problem. Okay, so we're going to go through a practice problem. And the problem we're going to start off with is like an elementary exercise. So our first problem is going to be (25 times 96). Okay, so when I look at 25 times 96, I'm going to follow the steps. So step 1 is to divide the number by 4. Remember, the number means the non-25 number. So I'm going to do 96 I wrote multiplication. Divided by 4. 96 divided by 4 is going to give me 24. Okay, so 24 is what I got from doing the division. Now I'm going to do my test of reasonableness to see if that is a okay answer for 25 times 96. So I'm going to leave 25, but I'm going to round 96 up to 100. And the reason why I chose 100 is because 96 rounds up to 100 as far as rounding to the nearest tens place, but also multiplying a number by 100 is so much easier because you know to just affix the zeros to the end of that number. So our answer would give us 2,500. So based on doing the T of R, we know that our answer should be a little less than 2,500. Well, when you look at 24, 24 is a lot less than 2,500. And because of that, we know that our answer, step 3, says to affix zeros and or add a decimal point. We don't need to add a decimal point because we don't want to make our number smaller. We need to add zeros because we want to make our number larger. So I'm going to end up with 2,400. So 25 times 96 is 2,400. Alright, let's get a little harder. We're going to try it with, we're going to do it with a decimal, and then we're going to do it with the number, a multiple of 25. So here we go. I'm going to divide it in parts. So first we're going to do the decimal. What if I had 25 times 8.4? Well, I'm still going to follow the same 3 steps. So following the same 3 steps, step 1 tells me to divide the number by 4, and again means the non-25 number. So I'm going to do 8.4 divided by 4, and that's going to give me 2.1. Okay? Then I'm going to do the T of R test. T of R test. And when I do that, I'm going to round 8.4 to 10 because 10 is just like 100. I can multiply a number by 10 by simply affixing a 0 to the end of that number. So 10 times 25 gives me 250. So what that 250 tells me is that my answer should be close to 250. And when I look what I got by division, I got 2.1, and 2.1 is not close to 250. So that tells me I need to affix how many zeros? I actually need to affix only 1 0. And the reason why I actually only need to affix 1 0 is because I need to move my decimal place one time, which is going to take place of me as if I was to affix the 2 zeros. So I'm going to do step 3. Step 3 is going to give me 210. And 210 is just a little less than 250. Alright, you did it. So then we're going to do a little harder. At least what would appear on paper to be a little harder, but it's really not. We're going to do 250 times 28. Okay? In this case, both numbers are actually not 25, but one number is a multiple of 25. And so we're going to use the number that is not a multiple of 25. So we're going to use 28. So step 1, take 28, divide it by 4, and I get 7. Step 2 is to do my T of R test. And I'm going to round 28 to about 30. And I'm going to do 30 times 250. When I multiply this, I'm going to focus on 3 and 25. And I know that 3 times 25 is 75. Because when I have 3 quarters, I have 75 cents. So therefore, 3 times 25 is 75. And I have 2 zeros, so I'm going to affix 2 zeros to that. So I have 7,500. So, looking at what I would get just by estimating and what I got by division, that tells me that I actually need to affix 3 zeros. I need to affix 3 zeros because my number is in the thousandths place. My number is in the thousandths place. And so 7 needs a couple of zeros, actually a few zeros. So my final answer would be 7,000. And that is how you multiply by 25. The next trick we're going to go over is rapidly dividing by 25. So when you want to rapidly divide by 25. When you want to do that, there are actually 4 steps for you to follow. And so with those 4 steps, as long as you follow them, then you are basically guaranteed to get your answer. Alright, so step 1 would be to disregard zeros and decimal points. Okay, so you're going to disregard zeros and or decimal points for some numbers. Okay, step 2 is going to be multiply the non-25 number by 4. Okay, and then we're going to go on to step 3. And step 3 is our test of reasonableness. So I'm just going to write step 3 as T of R. Okay? And what you do with the test of reasonableness is, remember, we're estimating, so we take the number and we either round it to the nearest hundredths, nearest tenths, nearest tens place, so that we can have a I don't want to say whole numbers, but easier numbers to work with as approximating our answer. And then step 4, which is the final step, is insert decimal point or affix zeros. Okay? So let's get started. The first problem we're going to do is an elementary exercise problem. So with our elementary exercise problem, I'm going to give you to start off with, I think, 9,000 divided by 25. So that's going to be our first practice problem. So 9,000 divided by 25, we're going to follow the steps. So step 1 tells us to disregard zeros and decimal points. So when I look here, I'm going to disregard zeros and decimal points. So that means I'm going to do 9 divided by 25. We're just writing it like that. That's because we're disregarding the zeros and decimal points. And then step 2 tells us to multiply the non-25 number by 4. So my non-25 is 9. So I'm going to take 9 and multiply by 4. And 9 times 4 is 36. Okay? So 9 times 4 is 36, which is, seems like a good answer we have thus far. But we're going to use our T of R to see if it is a good answer to have. So using T of R, I'm going to take my original numbers and I'm going to approximate them. So with 9,000 and with 25, I can approximate them to be, I say leave 9,000 because it's a simple number. But I'm going to estimate 25 up to 30. Remember, when you divide two numbers that have zeros in it, for every zero that the smaller number has, you can take a zero away from the larger number. So now I have 900 divided by 3, which means 9 divided by 3 is 3, and I'm going to affix 2 zeros. Okay, so what this tells me is that my number that I got from step 2 actually needs to get closer to 300. So the only way I can get closer to 300 is by me adding a 0 or affixing a 0 to the end of the number. So I'm going to affix a 0. And therefore my final answer is 360. Not 3,600, sorry. Alright. Alright. So now we're going to try a little harder. And it's only a little harder because instead of dividing by 25, we're going to divide by 250. And I'm going to leave room here to show you a little trick of my own. Alright, so the number that we're going to start off with is 3,300 divided by 250. Initially, you see large numbers, but if we follow our 4 steps, we're going to see relatively small numbers. So following our first step is disregard zeros and decimal points. So step 1, I now have 33 divided by 25. This is just for temporary. I disregard it. And then step 2 tells me to multiply the non-25 number by 4. So the non-25 number is 33. So I'm going to take 33 times it by 4. Okay? 33 times 4 is basically saying 11 times 4, which is 44, and then times 44 by 3. So I'm going to end up with actually 132. Okay? So I have 132, and with 132, I'm like, oh, I'm getting somewhere. But I'm going to use the T of R to see is where I'm going. Is that number too large or too small for what my final answer should be? So with T of R test, I'm going to take 3,300 and 2,500, and I'm going to round them to 3,300. Again, I can eliminate some zeros here. And I get 30 divided by 3 is 10. Well, what this tells me is that obviously my number is too large. So how can I get 132 closer to 10? The only way I can do that is by inserting a decimal point. My decimal point will have to go between the 3 and the 2. So therefore my final answer would be 13 and 2/10. Alright. For our final thing about dividing by 25, we're actually going to do a decimal. So we're going to divide by 25 hundredths. So we have 4.2 divided by 25 hundredths. Okay? Dividing 4 by 25 hundredths, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to put it in terms of a fraction. The reason why I put it into terms of a fraction because it helps me remember that 25 is the same as 1/4. And so So 25 divided by 1/4. Well, we know that when we do work with fractions, that we don't divide fractions. Actually, we actually multiply by its reciprocal. So what this tells me is that I can actually take this number, 4.2, and the reciprocal of 1/4 is 4. So I can take 4.2 and times it by 4. Okay? So 4.2 times 4 is going to give me 16.8. So my final answer is 16.8. So what we know here is that any number that you are dividing by 0.25, it just simply means that you are going to multiply by 4. So keep that in mind. Hope that trick helps you. Okay, so far in this lesson we've learned how to multiply and divide by 25. What we're going to do is divide by 25 using the abacus. And we're going to do the problem that we did, 9,000 divided by 25. So the first thing we're going to do is, how would I create 9,000 on the abacus by itself to begin with? To create 9,000, I would go to the thousands row, because this is my ones, tens, hundredths, and I'm going to go to my thousands, and that gives me 9,000. Okay? When you're doing division, however, with the abacus, you actually start from the top of the abacus. So I'm going to start at the top of the abacus, and I'm going to use the same beads that I used, the same color beads that I used on the bottom to create the same, to create it at the top. So I use the red beads on the bottom, so I'm going to use the red beads at the top to also create 9,000. Just so that you won't get distracted, to eliminate the excess zeros, I suggest using a sticky note, and you can use a sticky note to cover the zeros you don't need, so that you can see that you're working with 9,000. When you're dividing a number, basically you're saying, when you're dividing a number by another number, you're basically saying how many times can said number go into other said number. So in this case, we want to know how many times can 25 go into 9,000. So we're looking for the solution of 9,000 divided by 25. When I look at my abacus, I only have 9 beads. So with those 9 beads, I obviously cannot make 25. So what I need to do is basically exchange 1,000's place beads for 10 100 place beads. And I still have the same value of 9,000. So when I do this, now I can start counting out 25. The 100's place is acting as my ones place, and then the thousands place is acting as my tens place. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15, 25. So that's one time that I can divide into 9,000 from the hundreds place. Now I'm going to try it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15, 25. That's 2 times that I can divide into. Well, I get to a problem. I run out of 100 beads. But again, I can trade in 1,000ths to receive 10 100ths. And now I can do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15, 25. And that's 3 times. So using my hundreds place, that's all I can divide into 25 is 300 times. Okay, so now I'm going to go down. So notice here that again, I don't have any tens to work with, so I'm going to trade in 1 100 to get 10 tens. Okay, so now I can do it again. Again, at this time, the tens is acting as my ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15, 25. That's 1 times with the tens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 25. That's 2 times. Now I have 1,000. I need to break my thousands into smaller parts so that I can borrow, so I can continue to count 25. So I'm going to trade in 1,000 to get 10 100ths. I'm going to trade in 1 100 to get 10 tenths. And now I can continue counting out 25. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15, 25. That's again using my tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15, 25. Once again using my tenths. I'm going to again trade in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15, 25. That's again using my tenths. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15, 25. And that's the final time. And now I have nothing else that I can divide 25 into. So my answer is 360. That is how you divide 9,000. I'm sorry, that is how you solve 9,000 divided by 25 using the abacus.